All right, welcome everyone. Welcome back to This is Dunder Moose. I am your host. This is Dunder Moose, and with me is Ryan, aka the Curator, and he has graciously agreed to come on my show here and kind of help pull back the curtain. I am very curious what goes on when you're trying to run a massive Braunstein, such as he has undertaken. So, I'll start with some history stuff if that's okay, Ryan. I'm gonna ask. I know that you've been on other shows and you've talked a little bit about this. So, let me ask. Uh, why did you start playing tabletop role playing games?
I've started playing tabletop role playing games just because I've kind of been fascinated with um, immersing myself in the fantasy and being a part of the fantasy.
Hmm.
And I I don't really get a kick out of LARPing or dressing up for that. So aside from novels and movies and stuff, this was the best way to do it.
Right on. And do you prefer to be a player or a DM?
I prefer to be a DM. I have too many control issues.
So, was your first experience as a DM like were you the kid that bought the set and got your
Yeah,
friends into it, or was your first experience as a player and then you were like, I need more of this?
I think I played one game of 5e back in 2016,
Okay.
and then um, stuff that's a lot to go into. I went down with my parents, and I didn't play until 2019. And when I played again in 2019, I GM'd about 12 sessions that were 5 to 6 hours each day, so like 12 days of just 5 to 6 hours of D&D.
In a
Uh,
row?
yeah, it was a Christmas break in the military, and so
Okay.
that's what we did. And we played we played a mixture. Well, we played using Knave, but we did a mixture of Don't Let Us Die in the Night of This Cold Winter is what I think it's called.
I haven't played
And
that one.
it's basically you're snowed in to like a village and you're trying to survive with as many villagers as you can, and the villagers are resources. So yeah, it's a pretty fun game. So we did that, and then I mixed that with a bit of Yoon Suin, and I put them in the Mountains of the Moon. And
Okay.
yeah, so Yoon Suin and Knave were probably my first true D&D game.
Okay, so your 2016 experience was with 5e, but when you were the DM, you went with something that was a little more rules light, a little more old
Mhm.
school style.
Yeah.
Is there a reason for that?
Yeah. So during that period where I wasn't playing D&D, um, I sort of snuck like watching D&D or like buying D&D PDFs just to like read, or
Yeah.
more so just to have. Um, so I did that by either going to the super Christian route of RPGs like Holy Lands or Dragon Raid,
Huh.
games like that, or I predominantly went towards the OSR because it doesn't have the D&D logo on it,
Yeah.
so I kind of could get away with
Under
that.
the radar. Okay.
Couldn't play anything, but I could
Yeah.
get away
Well,
with that.
so that's resonating for me for a couple reasons. I also grew up in a Christian home. I'm still committed follower of Christ.
hmm
I'm 46 years old, and my parents are still uneasy with me playing D&D. So that's kind of funny. Um, and
Yeah,
I
we.
also my OSR experience has largely been purchasing a bunch of PDFs, and so I've actually got. I recommend if you guys go on DTRPG a lot, this stapler, you can print off your booklet size, 8.5 by 11, and staple it right down the spine, and it's pretty sweet.
That's
But
actually pretty cool.
yeah, so but like I'm curious. How do I put this? Um, what has had the biggest impact on the way that you play? Who or what has had the biggest impact on the way that you do that you game master and run your games?
That's hard because
Yeah.
I was definitely a Critical Role fan,
Mm-hmm.
and I would sneak, or I'd vicariously live through actual plays
Yeah.
since I didn't play for a while. So I'd watch Adventure Zone. Um, I'd watch what is it? Critical Role. I watched a Christian one called City on a Hill. They're pretty good. I haven't listened to them in a while. Um,
I feel like a lot of people like that's their school for it, right? Like there's something about this hobby about the books, but like there is also something about being inducted in by a group and you learn it as you go, right? And if you don't have a group that can offer that, I think that's been one of the big values of these actual plays that have become so popular since the pandemic is that you can watch other people do it and take notes and say, "Oh, okay, this is how this goes." That
yeah,
kind of
I'd probably, for my style, I'd probably give it a 3 or 4 way tie.
thing.
Like
Okay.
Ben Milton, a lot of the concepts of like old school play were introduced to me through his channel.
Yeah.
Um, Crafty Matt and Crossface probably are a big influence on like confirming or denying which of those principles I was exposed to from Ben are
Yeah.
worth implementing.
And you met
And
those guys on Twitter?
yeah, I met them on Twitter. I think we got into an argument, and then like 2 months later or whatever, we're buddy.
Yeah, that
Um,
happens a lot. First you're fighting tooth and nail and then you see eye to eye.
yeah, and then probably Critical Role would be a big, or just actual plays that I listed would be a big influence because
Okay.
I know the BROSR specifically is like, oh, do your merchants and your goofy NPCs. Those don't really matter. Just do all that stuff as downtime log activity. And part of me is like, but I kind of want to do a funny voice or mannerism and with a little goofy guy covered in black powder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I,
so okay.
I don't really, but
I play in Trollopulus, and I will admit that I have gotten the great Jeffro Johnson to do voices on occasion.
ooh.
So yeah, that was pretty fun. If you see him around, you can ask him to do the Lenny the Owl impression for Foam the Gnome.
Is Lenny the Owl the one with the lollipop for Tootsie
No,
Roll?
he was so I it was my first time ever playing AD&D First Edition, and I rolled up an illusionist thief gnome, and I had no idea what I was doing. But we go into this we go into this dungeon, and he listens for noises, and the sound that we hear is hooting. And I didn't realize that Jeffro had just rolled on the sounds table to see what they heard when I listened, and so he starts like doing this hooting sound, and I had let it drop that gnomes can speak with burrowing animals. Well, we came into this menagerie, and there was these like 8 foot tall burrow owls, but because they were burrowing creatures, I was able to talk to them. And so I made a deal. I said, I can pick this lock, but if I do let you out, the strongest of you has to pledge himself to me. So,
Okay.
so that's how I got Lenny the burrow owl. It was my first time ever playing, and he had this kind of, I don't know if it's like a Bronx accent or what. It's pretty hilarious, but yeah. Anyway, enough about that. I get what you're saying about it. It's fun to do the voices, and like even if you play with guys that don't do that, if you start, they can't help but get into it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Now, I think that like when I see like examples of Critical Role that my friends have given me, or there's a so it wasn't Matt Mercer, but it was another guy doing it. Like he was doing like the prequel.
Brennan Lee Mulligan, probably.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
they held up for me. This is the example. Like this is amazing gameplay, right? And they sent me a clip of where he's basically role playing some, god that's gotten released, some evil god that's gotten released, And like you just see all of his players just standing there with their mouths open while he just describes a bunch of stuff happening. Like he's ripping a dude's face off, and I'm sure it has a lot of meaning. And everyone's like, "Isn't that so cool?" And I'm like, "Nobody's playing; they're just watching this guy act." So I feel like it can go too far to where it's all about the show that the story that the DM's trying to tell everybody, and like the players become audience, and the only agency they actually get is how do you want to do this. But I'm not trying to, man. This I hope this interview doesn't stir up a bunch of crap because I enjoy the show too, and a lot of my friends really like it. But
Yeah,
I've moved on the way that I play, so
it's entertaining to watch, but Crafty has definitely like made it a point and sort of got me to understand that it is a show, and at some point, is it going to be entertaining for me as a player if I were sitting at that table? And
yeah.
I'm like, okay, sure, yeah, probably not. And that was a big convince of me to try getting rid of a lot of those habits picked up from those sources.
Now, if I had players that were all like class A voice actors and I could just let them do a scene, like I would love that. So don't get me wrong. If they like said, "Hey, Dundermoose, we want you to come on Critical Role," I'm not gonna be like, "Oh, I wouldn't have any fun on your show." You know what I mean? Like that would be awesome. Honestly,
Yeah, it'd probably be fun. And for the most part, as an audience member who has DMs before after watching and before watching some seasons, for the most part, I can't tell when it's scripted. But then you get to episodes where it's like this big Epigee Solstice thing they're building up to, and Matt talks for 2 hours and dice isn't rolled, and then suddenly fan favorite characters are smashed to pieces at the drop of a hat. It's like, wait, I don't recall there being save versus deaths in this system. What's going on here?
Yeah. So sometimes the DM grabs the wheel. And so I feel like is the crux at the different styles of play. And like, I've put it that you've got to play with people who speak your alignment language. A lot of people online are saying this is the only way to play, or you're doing it wrong, and everyone gets mad and yells at each other, and that's all good fun too, as long as nobody gets their feelings hurt. But I do feel like that my tastes have changed over time, and that I have certain preferences. And I'm not trying to tell anyone they're doing it wrong. If somebody's perfectly happy to just do the theater kid thing, I don't think it's wrong to look down on them. I know that like that wouldn't be as satisfying as an experience for me in where I'm at now. But if they still enjoy it, more power to them. I feel like we do this thing where we hear how someone else plays, and then instead of actually trying it and seeing what it's like, we just in our mind assume we know what it's like, and then we argue against that straw man that we've built, and we say, well, you play dumb or you play stupid, and you're not really engaging with their ideas at all. You're just engaging with what you think they're saying. So
yeah,
all that said, if people were like, you know what, I can't get enough Curator, I want to support him, what are some ways that people could get more of your stuff or support you?
You could probably follow me on Twitter. That's where I'm most consistently on. I am currently writing a blog for school because it's required, and so I'm trying to like theme that towards D&D stuff. So maybe I'll stick with it. Who knows?
Right.
I have a Instagram where I post a lot of the art I doodle, and I have a Giant Slayer Games shop and an itch.io shop, and I'm leaning towards being more active on Giant Slayer just because I can talk to them and they look like some pretty based guys.
Yeah, those I have noticed them on Twitter. Let me see if I can pull that one up.
Yeah,
I might have the wrong one. I think this is your itch.io page, but this is the kind of stuff you would find on their stuff as well, right?
Yes. pretty much all but one of these PDFs are, well, the Peacockatrice Trail and some little war gamey thing I did using the Risk system are on Giant Slayer Games.
Okay.
The rest of these are kind of projects that either I was working on with the BROriental Adventures game, and I saw some cracks in the foundation, so I got to work on those, or they're projects that I've put on permanent hiatus.
Right on. Well, so as I'm looking at this, I think these look incredible. You have a certain art style that seems to carry over from one project to the next. Do you want to tell us a little bit about how you develop that and what your workflow is? How do you create this stuff?
Yeah. So I guess I have a teacher who's always saying, if you want to get good, you got to emulate people you like.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this artist that goes by Sketch Goblin. He draws what's he do? He draws character profiles for people's D&D characters or other RPG characters. He draws D&D profiles for them. Cool. And I always wanted some for my game, but I'm a college student and I'm cheap sometimes. So I'm like,
buying the ramen noodles.
Yeah. So I thought, why not try drawing in his style? And I did it, and I quite enjoyed what I was able to make. So I kept with it. And then I thought, why don't I try doing landscapes with it? And when I started doing that, the fourth one I did, which is the main one you're seeing on the screen there, that's when I really hit my stride, and it started kind of becoming my own style and stuff.
It looks vectory to me. Is this?
It's all drawn in vectors on Adobe Fresco.
I was going to say Illustrator. A Fresco. I've not heard of that one.
Yeah, so Adobe Fresco is an iPad one, and then the reason I use that one is because I have an iPad and I like to see what I'm actually drawing rather than those Wacom tablets where you have to look up while your pen is down on the bottom. Yeah. And then a neat thing about that app is you can basically send your drawing over Wi-Fi to Illustrator on the desktop. So it's pretty cool.
I like the torchlight in this Smoke and Daggers one.
Yeah, that I think was my first time playing with light. And then the hex crawling one is where I started to refine it.
Yeah, it's got a definite vibe. Doing some stuff for Shadow Dark, looks like.
I was doing Shadow Dark for a while, but the guys on the Gilded server convinced me to go with OSE because that's the closest to the stat blocks in the core Yunsuin book without buying Rule Cyclopedia, which would give a WotC money, and I don't really like giving WotC money.
Right on. I think we can all understand that sentiment at the moment. So, all right, enough introductory stuff. Let's get to the main event.
Cool.
At what point did you get the idea for BROriental Adventures?
So I was
And while you're thinking about that, I'm just going to call out Lord Mateus's comment. He said his Yunsuin stuff really met the vibe of the campaign well. I feel the same. Like, I was learning. I was a patron. I was a Banan the Far Glider, and I did not know what I was doing.
Yeah, he just had another comment there.
This one, Shadow Dark might be where the money is at.
I hope it would be, but I made this little Shadow Dark Yunsuin themed adventure that I made to pass out for free at Free RPG Day.
Yeah.
And it didn't really get picked up at my local game store that often.
Really?
It was probably, It might have been because my local game store put a limit on the books you could get.
Hmm.
But
so I mean, it is niche of niche, right? Like
Mhm.
there's the big dogs are like I would say fifth edition and Pathfinder, and then the OSR is kind of a reaction to that. But
And
the
big
Shadow
dogs
Dark
in there
did
would be
it did get
DCC, OSE,
oh
and
yeah
then
DCC.
Swords and Wizardry. And then you go the niche inside of there, and you find games like Pathfinder, Knave,
Yeah.
um, uh, Wizards on skateboards or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, Burning Wheel, all that kind of stuff. But Shadow Dark did make over $1 million on Kickstarter, so you'd think.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm hoping that when the physical book comes out, it was supposed to come out in October, but it got pushed back a month. So I'm hoping when the physical book comes out, it'll be easier to convince people at the game store to sit down and
yeah. Well,
because the art is what sold me on it. Like the
yeah.
end screen, just seeing that set up at a table and then a little sticky note that says open table. I don't know why I wouldn't sit down at that table if I
Right.
had no idea what it was.
Well, so Brian makes an interesting point in the chat. He says maybe they first have to get the Shadow Dark before they can identify your adventure, right? So something does well on Kickstarter. I don't know. I didn't pledge it or anything. I'm not sure like what all came with your Kickstarter for Shadow Dark. So they might like not only have the have to learn the system, but they might already have some adventures and stuff to get through that came with. The game stores push the WotC stuff over everything else. Yeah, you really do. Like the local one I have has DCC stuff, which is cool, but it's
Mine
mainly
does too.
WotC. It's mainly WotC and yeah, and those
Mine
little
they had for a little bit of, they don't carry a lot of it, but they had some Castles and Crusade stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. Which
Yeah, I think
I
mine
know,
did
I know
Control
isn't
as well.
OSR, but I consider it OSR.
Okay. All right. So but did you answer my question? How did you get the idea for BROriental?
So I have always wanted to play a grand game that lasted a while.
Yeah.
I was watching Dungeons and Diversity, and he's like, "Yeah, my game's been going for 20 years," and I'm like, "Whoa, how are people doing this?" And at the same time, I was just working on the PDFs because I kind of find enjoyment out of that.
Yeah.
And I was talking with Crossface and the Basic Expert and Crafty, and I think even Lord Mateus. And Crossface said, "You're going to turn Yunsuin into your Greyhawk." And maybe a month or two later, the BROSR started to pop up on everybody's radar again, and they were in a good and friendly mood. So I kind of got enamored by that. And
Yeah.
their
I had a similar experience with them.
Mm-hmm. Their promises of you don't have to over prep. You will have a 20-year campaign from this. Your players will do all the prepping for you through patron play and all that stuff. That was like, oh, I don't have to do any of the work. That sounds none of the work, and I get to sit down and have a 20-year campaign.
That does sound amazing.
And so I'm like, okay, yeah, cool. I'm full blown. Let's do this. And
all right.
I wanted to run a game, and I was going on Ryan Howard's stream, and I was like,
all right.
Sure, why not? I'll just say I'm playing a game, and we'll see what happens. And within 3 or 4 days, I had 67 people on the server wanting to play. And
did you have any idea that you were going to have that kind of buzz when you started this?
No, and
I mean, that has got to be one of the biggest
so
ever.
Much stress. It was. It's like I never really threw parties in high school, but I imagine it's like you're having a party with 6 of your friends, and 67 people show up, and the cops get called, and you're like, I wasn't even supposed to have any friends over this weekend. What happened? Like,
right.
I lost control of it almost immediately.
How did that feel? Like, at what moment did you know this is going to be way bigger than I had planned on? Like, how was that rolling in?
The moment Jeffro started tweeting about it and saying that it was going to be the most revolutionary thing to happen to D&D since Greyhawk, and I started having a panic attack.
All right, well, say what you want about the man.
Yeah,
he gets eyeballs and he gets reactions.
He gets eyeballs and reactions.
I really enjoy him. I know there's people that have a hard time with the BROSR. I'm like you. I did not see whatever. There must have been something harsh upstream of us.
Mm-hmm.
Some like real heavy back and forth that either one side was playing and the other one didn't understand and took it personal, or maybe they were both.
So
maybe they were both harsh, or
right after I pulled out of the campaign, because I won't say it ended because Holyfield is still keeping it going.
Yeah.
That man is the saint for doing that. But
and it's got some mad design skills, I gotta say. Well, let's just pull this up right now. Let me go to the next slide. I don't know if you guys saw this video on Twitter that he put together, but it is chef's kiss good.
Yeah, that was right as that tweet that Jeffro was talking about happened. So all these memes were coming out before the game even started. People are saying it's
the meme
best thing ever. I'm panicking mostly to myself at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, right after I was kind of mad at Jeffro and the BROSR for a while, because I'm like, all these things that they said were going to happen didn't happen. And people are saying they didn't happen because it's my fault, but I was doing what people were telling me to. And that's kind of the attitude I had going. And it probably took me a good month and a half to realize that the main issue I had in that department there was I was getting advice from everyone, but I didn't know how to say no. And then I'm on the younger side, and I think this is an epiphany that Gen Z folks like myself are going to have in the coming years. We have a very hard mentor crisis for people. There's not really people. There's not the big brother in the inner city type of thing for everyone going on. So you still need that mentorship. You're still going to seek it out. So we go to the internet for that. Yeah. And I've come to the epiphany that the internet is a good place for information, but it's not always the best place for advice. And
well, you're dealing with hype, right? Mm-hmm. Like there's like the example I think of is LinkedIn. I had a hard time doing Twitter for the longest time. I can hardly abide Facebook. I like LinkedIn because it's professionals, people that do what I'm doing, and nobody's putting pictures of their breakfast or cats on there, right? But there is, as you're around there for a bit, you do get a sense that a lot of the thought leaders or experts are really just trying to accumulate clout. And so you have to start asking yourself, how much of this is legit versus how much are they trying to set themselves up as an expert?
Yeah, and Jeffro gives a lot of good advice. He swing dancing, I haven't been very good, and I've often walked away from it frustrated, but I think he's in the right direction with saying people need to get into social events like that. Now, do I think it's the end all be all? I'm not sure about that. I think when Jeffro says that AD&D is the end all be all of systems, or the BROSR philosophies are the end all be all, I'm not so sure about that. I think they're great tools, and I think there's a lot you can learn from AD&D, but I think there's reasons why certain things haven't stuck, and that could be because we were playing wrong for 40 years, like they said, or that could be because THAC0 or attack matrices are cumbersome, and DMs or players just want to get to the game. I played with OSE's strange attack matrix slash THAC0 thing, and while I respect THAC0 now, having played with it and knowing people who enjoy it, I just know it's not personally for me because I feel that there's too many variables that I'm having a hard time keeping track of, because I have to keep track of the players, the enemies, the setting, and the plot hooks on top of all this. And I feel it takes too long for me to reference. I feel it slows me down.
So I got two questions for you. First of all, I really appreciate that insight that you had about the mentorship thing and too much advice that you just accept. And what an amazing thing that you learned this with something that doesn't count like a game, right? There's people that are going to need to learn that for their career and family life and that kind of stuff. And so that's one awesome thing about D&D that I feel is that we can bump into these things in a sandbox that's pretty safe to make mistakes in and learn big life lessons that you can apply to your actual relationships. But my second question is, so you listed Jeffro. Did you have any other mentors in this? I think you mentioned Crossface.
Crossface and Holyfield were instrumental.
Okay.
Absolutely instrumental in this. I set up encounter tables wrong, and Holyfield like totally corrected me on that, and I think I'm better for it. Mm-hmm. And Crossface, he kept me going from probably week 2. Week 2 is when I really started to like feel it start to falter and hit the wall and get burned out. And he just kept me going until the end of the month. And then he probably would have preferred that I just kept going, and probably thinks I could have kept going, but I was just angry at the BROSR at that point. And I
ask? Are you at this point? Are you on good terms with your mentors, or is there still some kind of ice?
Crossface, Crafty, and I, and Holyfield, we get along just well. I was talking just last week with Holyfield, and he was getting me excited for. I saw
you mentioned you were going to run another a small scale, just a session.
Maybe 4 weeks max. Just to dip my toes into it.
Okay.
Applying lessons that I learned from the first go and see if I can do it better this time without burning myself out.
How about you and Jeffro?
Jeffro, I don't take Jeffro everything he says at face value anymore. I respect the guy, but I don't blindly agree with everything he says. That doesn't mean I disagree with him or I think he's wick-wack. He's basically like my uncle in real life, who he's a crazy opinionated guy who his way is the only true way in his eyes, and that doesn't mean he's wrong for it. It just means you have to put on a different mask or a different attitude when you interact with him, and I think that's perfectly fine. I'm cool with being friends with Jeffro and interacting with him on Twitter. But if I disagree with something on him, I'm not going to be quiet about it.
Right on. Yeah. No, and nor should you. When I think of Jeffro, it's kind of like the tough love approach, right? And there was something that something Crossface said. I think it was last week. He mentioned, that when he was going to say something, he was going to say it full chested or full throated or something like that. And I wonder, like, how much of that, if something's worth saying it, you say it as, strong as you can. And if you're saying, here's a way to play that we haven't done in a while, and, you're going to come up against resistance. I don't know. I'm not trying to excuse anything or explain anything. I'm just going to say that, like, my experiences with Jeffro have been amazing. Like, some of the best D&D or role playing in general that I've ever played have happened at his table while he was at the helm. And I think he's a visionary. I think he's often misunderstood, but I think he can also he comes across very passionately, and a lot of people are passionate about this hobby, and I feel like we can get at cross purposes or whatever. But back to the topic. Yeah, I see Dan. He says, with all respect, I'm here for the subject of the video. Back to BROriental Adventures. So you put your idea out there. The party, 67 people show up to the party. How did you try to organize that? And what was the split between people that were interested in playing, people that were just lurkers, people that wanted a patron versus like co-DMs?
I can go to the server settings and of what we have still in the server. So a lot of patrons left. So I remember there being about 22 patrons at the most point. About 4 referees, with I'd say 3 of those playing games. 2 consultants. Looks like we lost a lot of players, but I think we had 20 or so players, with maybe 10 or 12 of those actually being active. And then we've lost a few, but I think we were at 31 people observing.
Okay.
So there were a ton of people. Yeah, it was nuts. Organized. We tried to keep it like structurally organized from the get-go, but that kind of got out from under me. So it kind of turned into open table games on Saturdays. I was wanting to do more days a week than that, but it just got away from me, and there was so much going on.
What was the what was the hardest to control? Was it the sessions? Was it the patron stuff?
It was the patron stuff.
All right. Because episode 1 of this series, I talked to Rick Stump, and when I used the word patron, he called me short, and he was like, "You mean your players?" Right? Mm-hmm. And he made the comment that he called it Monty Hall. If you give anybody, like, he even regrets the times he let people start at level 2, right?
Yeah, I regret that.
So what was it about that experience that made it crazy for you?
There were probably 2 patrons out of all of them that I felt did it perfectly.
Do you want to name names on that one? Give people some credit? Did I just put you on the spot?
Them on. I think Tom Bombadil, was it?
Yeah.
I think Tom Bombadil was one.
Czar Bombadil?
Czar Bombadil, yep, that's who it was. He ran a sort of, what was his thing? He ran a museum, and he was just tailoring adventures towards the players, and the players ate that up. Yes. And he would just build his estate and focus on ways of getting money, and he built a dungeon, and that was it. He didn't really need too much direction from me.
So he was player focused. He wasn't trying to win his own game. He was trying to add value to the table sessions with what he set up. I think that's key.
Yes. And then the other player, Mount Nibaros, they put together one of the neater patron concepts, where they were a witch who would use brothels to spy on the city or whatever, and her daughters would run those brothels, but they never got to that point. So what they ended up doing was they solo played their witch and the assets that they would come across, exploring and conquering their little island that they had. And while no one went over there, they did this daily, and some of the Topaz Isle factions were interacting with them. And I know myself and at least one of the other DMs were on the edge of our seats, just watching what was happening going on over there with them. You had Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson falling in love with the old woman who he can't tell, and
you can't see through her glamour, right?
Can't see through her glamour. And then we had that moment where one of the 3 guys who was glamored drops, and it's like, oh, are we gonna have a battle right here? And it didn't go that way, but it was like, stop what you're doing. You need to figure out. Everybody needs to figure out what's going on, and that was genuinely really cool. And that's not to discount all the other patrons. It was hard to work with what I gave them, because I didn't even quite know what I was doing. like Lord Mateus, I think genuinely looking back on it, he did the best with what he had, and I wasn't always able to answer his questions, but he did really well with his patron concept. He took it to the full direction and that it probably would have went in. So I was satisfied with that. But then there were other things thrown in there, and this
So
is
you had a
probably
few that were giving you energy and like giving you surprises, and you were like, "This is fascinating. This is exciting. This helps." Starting to try and live up to some of the promises, right? And then you had others, and we don't need to name names, but it seemed like there were a few that like made things harder for you.
yes. One of the reasons why I think Rick is right about the Monty Hall thing, especially if you're going into a game that the BROSR and Jeffro are advertising with zero prep, and you're building the game at the table mostly.
Yeah.
One of the problems with giving 30 people or so pretty much DM powers, and anything they say immediately is added to the setting, you get really weird things that probably don't mesh well with your setting idea.
Yeah.
Like you get real life political stuff under a thin veneer, and it's like, oh, okay, so I need to figure out what this is now, or does anybody know what this actually is? Or you get mistakes that you allowed, and now that someone has DM powers, you can't really pull those mistakes back. Like
Yeah.
Yoon Suin is a great setting, and in the setting it says you can use foreign characters, but I feel like foreign characters don't mesh well with the setting unless the players have a really good understanding of what the setting's supposed to be. And then when you allow races or European like characters into the setting, that really twists and warps it in a way that it wasn't intended to be.
Well, so
That's mainly my mistake.
Yoon Suin had the concept of outsiders, right?
Yes.
But like I feel like that was more of a
It was loosely
Hulu
defined
type thing than a Westerner.
It was 6 things at once, because Yoon Suin is kind of built to be a toolkit, and you make it your own setting for that. So you had the Cthulhu-like outsider. Then you also had lore that pointed to anyone who is not from your village is basically an outsider.
Okay. Yeah.
And then you had lore that pointed to, hey, if they're from Xinjiang, which is like China, or if they're from Europe, they're pretty much an outsider. So even the core book isn't really cemented on what an outsider is, because the little dungeon we were running, it said a moth was an outsider, like a Cthulhu like moth, and it's like, okay, I don't know where I'm going with this.
Yeah. Well, there's like 4 or 5 mysteries right up front that they're just like, you guys have to figure this out, right? Like, what are the outsiders? There's a few more. Like it's meant to tantalize, right?
Yeah, what are the outsiders? What are the crabmen up to? What do the dragons want? And there's a 4th one that's eluding me right now.
Is it the sea, the raiders from the sea?
No. That was a pretty fun, interesting thing that I did not expect, was that people would be so interested in the Topaz Isles, and it was mainly patrons who were super interested in it. But that, I feel, is one of the underdeveloped regions of the setting, and so for the past month, kind of like to pull myself out of this little state I've been in where I'm not really happy with how the game was, I would just sort of meditate by working on making what I felt was missing from the Topaz Isle, putting that there, while also learning from the mistakes. Like, if I were to start everything all over again, I probably wouldn't let anyone start as a patron. You'd probably have to have your PC reach name level before I handed over those keys to you.
Yeah.
So
I will say this about playing in Trollopolis. The guys that I play with there like Macho Mandolph and Brigadine, and like these are guys that know the system so well that you could trust them to run a whole area fairly. You wouldn't need to hold their hands. Like, yeah, the game runs itself. It's no prep in the sense that you don't need to set a bunch of stuff up, but the prep is already baked in with people that know the system, know the setting, and know what they're about. So
Mm-hmm.
with my character, first of all, I was on vacation when it started. So I was up in the woods in the north of Michigan. I had no Wi-Fi. I had one bar. I'd purchased OSE on a Humble bundle, and so I'm like trying to download the PDF, and then I had the resources you gave me, and so like it took me forever on my iPad to switch, to load. And I'm trying to learn OSE. I'm trying to learn Yoon, and I'm reading your faction stuff, and I can throw that up on the screen if you guys want
Yeah,
to
sure.
um see that. So like I felt like I was running down a sand dune trying to catch up with what was expected of me as a patron. So in retrospect, how much of your problems did you think came from having inexperienced people given godlike power in your setting?
I'd say 50% to 60% of the problems came from that, and 40% of the problems came from an inexperienced DM with this style of game give those powers to the players or patron players, and then those patron players be like, yeah, so what do I do with this? And me not really having an answer.
So how much hand holding did you have to do for inexperienced patrons such as myself? Like, did you get a lot of DMs? Were you doing a lot of back and forth, you and Crossface and Crafty and Hollyfella?
Rossface came in towards the latter half and was picking up the slack I was leaving because I was getting so burnt out because it was an 8-hour a day job for 30 days.
Oh my gosh.
Um,
So, but you didn't
yeah,
just throw us in there with nothing, right? Like we've got these rules here.
Mm-hmm.
Tried.
So one of the issues we had was you could only do one action a day.
Yeah.
I accidentally tweaked that to 3 and didn't realize it till towards the end. Another issue is that really should have been one action a week.
Yeah.
Because
you're still 60 a week, right? How many a day is 60 people? Well, 30 or however many
30 people, and maybe half of them are active that day. So that's you have 40 things going on. Like it took me 2 hours each night to write the downtime log.
Yeah.
But even with that, the PCs would tell me, we don't know what to do. There's too many rumors. We can't pick what to do.
That was something I noticed too when I was trying to get up to speed. Like people were just bombing the chat with tons of hooks, and I was like, do I put a hook out there, or like, is it okay for me to just chill for a bit? The other thing with I can show you guys. Let me get back to the slides for a second. I was right here in this little green section. I was in the domed quarters, and it was next to this. Everything that's in kind of the purplish color here, the light purple. It was like the old city where like all the interesting, dangerous stuff is. So I had multiple factions trying to come through my area. And like before I even knew what I was doing, I'd already been robbed. Like somebody had come in, stolen a bunch of money. I had captured some of the thieves, and people were
that was Lord Mateus.
Okay, Lord Mateus. Okay, so he had some kind of faction out there.
He was the yellow, and he was actually, I think, preparing to like kick you out and invade you.
Yeah, it was getting ready to go PvP. Yep, there he is. That was me. He says. So I had like started making alliances with some other factions, and one of them was like super against Lord Mateus and was like trying to work together to stamp him out. And I just thought, well, we'll just torture the people we have and get some information. And so instead of torturing them, I turned them all loose in the city, in the lost part of the city, and I said, just drop them off by themselves. If any of them can make, I gave them a disease or a poison. And I said, if you can make it back, we'll give you the antidote. But you've got to bring back some form of Fog of war getting dispelled right now. I said you got to bring back an artifact because I was hoping to get some magic items, and whoever makes it back. And then I also once the ones so some of them just died. Some of them made it back. Some of them actually went back to him, and then I was like, okay, I offered to pay them to turn on him and like being informed, like send them back as spies. So that's the kind of shenanigans that go on in this thing.
Yeah, and
Right?
that's the kind of stuff that was genuinely positive.
Yeah.
But I had to sift through 7 hours of grime to get to that, and
Yeah.
I don't know if that is worth it.
Yeah, the faction stuff is very compelling. It was fun and it was awesome, but like you say, there's like the signal to noise on there, and I feel like as a patron player, the one thing that I didn't have experience as far as I didn't know OSE, I didn't know the setting.
Mm-hmm.
The experience that I had was as a low level patron in Trillopolis, and we had some crazy shenanigans that go on there, and the idea of giving up your character to the DM, saying, "Here's the plan." You know who this character is from our interaction. You run it how you want, and then like letting go of what's gonna happen and just like setting intricate schemes with that player focus. Where I feel like the real benefit to the patron is competing for the attention of the people that are actually playing at the table. Like the reward is not wiping out your enemies, although Lord Mateus probably would have felt very satisfied to get rid of me.
That was his goal.
Yeah, he was probably going to do it too, if I'm being honest. But the reward for me would be to get that attention from the players, where they're like, "I want to interact with your guy. I want to do missions for him. I'm interested in." And I was also trying to build a dungeon underneath my palace was pretty awesome. Like I had a menagerie, I had a library of stuff, because it was the what were they called? It was a travel guild. Explorers Guild, and so I was looking for information and maps and that kind of stuff. So enough about me, though. You did give us, let's go through these rules that you wrote for us, as far as like, if you're going to be a patron, here's what you need to know in order to set up your domain and run it, right?
Yeah, so these are after having played. So the action orientated factions, that's something I came up with after the whole thing. Basically, I don't think people running a Braunstein should Monty Hall anyone, whether they want to be a patron or ever. If you want to be a patron, you got to be a player and you got to earn that.
Yeah.
But the action-oriented factions thing, some of us want to play in environments where there's active factions combating one another or faction shenanigans going on, but you can't really simulate that if you're like no patrons until everybody gets name level.
Yeah.
That can be 36 sessions or whatever, and you got no faction stuff going on. So apparently I reinvented the wheel here in just making an event table for certain factions, and that's basically what the second page is here's the faction, here's what happens to the faction, and roll that once a week. And that's the what going into the new game I'm hoping will work. But with I am not convinced that Braunstein or one-to-one time or patrons can't work because I was inexperienced. It's Crafty and Crossface broke it down, mainly Crossface, by saying I went in blindfolded thinking I was going to lift like 10 or 50 pounds, and I ended up lifting 350. And I got injured.
Yeah, you pulled a muscle.
Yeah, so I pulled a muscle basically. And because I pulled a muscle, does that mean that lifting weights is inherently wrong? Not necessarily. I'm not experienced enough, or I haven't run into this exact same issue over like 6 or 7 games that I can say, oh, this is not going to work type of thing. So I kept those rules in there. I may have tweaked them a little bit, but I don't want to, if I end up publishing this, be the person that turns someone off from that style of game. So that's why I kept it in there.
I really appreciate that perspective, man. I wonder how many people could go through that and have that balance in mind instead of just saying this whole system stinks, it doesn't work, I tried it. Like say, well, maybe there were some things I could have done differently. So I'm gonna quote Lord Mateus again here. He says, "For me, I saw this as a war game, so I cared less about the players and more about what I could do to mess with other patrons. The players were just potential tools for me." And then he follows up with, "Knowing what I know now, I would do things differently." I don't know. There is something about the self-serving nature of a patron. So, like for example, my first example, I did similar to you. I was learning about this stuff, but I was like, I'm not in any games. I could beg and ask and pester people like I'm doing with this podcast, or I could just try it. So I just tried it with my in-person group. We were doing Keep on the Borderlands, and I just started small. I gave one player control over one of the characters, and they gave another player control over the Lord of the Kobolds that are in the Caves of Chaos. And they immediately came up with stuff that I never would have as the DM. Stuff that screwed the players, like put them in a situation where they had to get creative to solve it. And they didn't care about, like, as a DM, I would have been like, well, I don't know how they're going to solve this, and maybe this wouldn't work. They were just like, no, like for example, they captured the cleric that was going in there, and I asked the guy over DM, I was like, all right, you know the party fled, but you've still got the cleric. He's in your pit trap. Do you want to eat him or try to give him for ransom? And he said, well, we want to ransom him for an ogre. The goblins have an ogre. We want our own. And like that dropped my jaw and blew my mind, and I thought it was hilarious because it's like, how are the players going to get you an ogre? And he's like, I don't care, I want my ogre, or they don't get their guy back. And I thought that was such an interesting choice that I never would have come up with. Like you said, where like people come up with creative stuff that you never would have. That's like the joy of it. But that was like such low level things, right? And yeah, so to Lord Mateus's point about like doing selfish things for his own patron, that can absolutely work. I'm sorry, I stepped on what you were about to say. What were you going to say?
Like, to Lord Mateus's thing, he was absolutely playing it as a war game. And the problem with that is, aside from Risk, I've never played a war game. So I was having to interpret that. So he's telling me how he's setting up his thing. And I hope you don't get mad at me for like spoiling some of the stuff you set up, because it was legit really cool, but I had no idea what to do with it. Like,
I will say, it was knowing that he was scheming and not knowing what he was up to was very intimidating for me as a player. So
he basically,
hats off to you for that, Mateus.
He basically set up armed checkpoints at every single entrance into his neighborhood. Then he set up the towers. He had like musical notes where everybody would like bow and worship him, and it would allow, and he would use that as a facade for spying on his own citizens using the towers and stuff. It was nuts. He took the prostitution brothel ring spy mechanic that I was trying to run with. Didn't really work well, unfortunately. And he, instead of like putting it in other people's stuff like I imagined he would, he put a bunch of them in his own territory. And his own territory.
That is brilliant.
He was paranoid people were gonna like spy on him.
I was going to. I was totally gonna buy some real estate in his area.
And he caught you every single time because of it. Because all of his prostitutes were like, hey, these people who are not with us are moving in on our territory, and it got them busted every single time.
Nice.
But beyond that, I didn't know what to do with it, because he's telling me privately, he's like, am I wasting my money doing this? And I can't clearly tell him yes or no.
I never thought to do that.
He was nuts.
He's on top of it.
It was both frustrating and impressive. It was frustrating because I had no wargaming experience. I was inexperienced with Braunstein, and I didn't know what to do with it, but it was also like, this guy's terrifying.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's the kind of stuff that is so exciting about this style of play, right? So it's so compelling. You want to have that kind of depth.
He was the big bad evil guy that the players never knew was there. like they had one interaction.
I was on to him. I knew Yankster was not to be trusted, but I had no idea how outmatched I was. So I'll say that much.
Oh, dude, he would have steamrolled you. Like I was borderline protecting you because, and I'm sorry, but
No, man, right on.
One of the issues
This is what
I
I want. I
had,
want this stuff to come out. I want people to
one of
know
the
how it is.
one of the issues I had with the game, with the patron front, that made it horrific, and this, I don't think this is anyone's fault but my own, because I didn't set up a deadline of I need all this information from your factions here.
Yeah.
And if it's not there, you're not a patron type of thing. Like if I did that, that probably would have made it run a little bit smoother. But Lord Mateus has this set up pretty much from day one, and he's trying to move in on everybody. Whereas you're in Michigan or whatever without Wi-Fi.
Way up in the woods.
And Lord Mateus is like, what's this guy right below me? Because he was right above you.
Yeah.
What's this guy right below me? What's he got going on? What's his place look like? And I'm over here like, they're supposed to be doing this themselves. I'm railroading, or I'm stepping in and taking away their player choice if I'm like, this is what they have, and I start making it up for you. So I'm like, you don't hear from your guys for a couple of days, hoping you'd like message me.
Oh, and so you were the one that was DM Fiat that I had captured them. That wasn't Roll? Okay.
Yeah. They did
taking pity on my remote location and saying.
So what happened was they did fail the roll.
Oh, okay. So that's okay. That's fair then.
They failed the roll, and so I messaged you. What is your protection? What is your? Because I needed to know if you had guards or if they would just be spotted and got away. And eventually, it got to the point where he kept asking, and I couldn't put it off anymore. So I had to DM Fiat that they were captured, because I told him for the past couple of days he hasn't heard from them, and I can't retcon that they came back to him because he's already doing other actions. So the best thing I could do was they were captured.
And so here's on my end of that. On my end of that, I could not get on the Discord. And so, like, we would drive into town, and my phone would connect, and I'd get a bunch of messages. I'm like, crap, what am I doing?
Yeah, you probably have like 400 messages.
Yeah,
I'd wake up every morning with like 60.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so, man, this is fun. I feel like we could do this all night, but what happened? When did the wheels start falling off for you? What was like the moment where you were like, I'm not having fun anymore. This is impacting the rest of my life. Because, I mean, if you look on the screen here, we've got like the meme war was strong on Twitter. It was hilarious. This is the cure to male loneliness, joining a 50-player DM. And I think that might have been part of why the whole party showed up, is because once the BROSR gets it and starts memeing, like people start having fun and it gets hilarious and that kind of stuff. But for you, what was like the tipping point?
It was partially the memes, and I really enjoyed the memes, but then you like a lot. Every patron concept was excellent. I can explain that. That was the one time I played as a player, and I wanted an alligator pet, and it just didn't go well, and I got my head bitten immediately.
I love when the alligator's like doing a backflip into the bite, like through it's like a ninja gator.
Yeah, so that actually is part of the reason. So I'll tackle this with 2 points. The memes. Everybody had excellent concepts, but I don't think everybody had a great grasp of the setting. Because you had memes like the Salt Right, and the Salt Right was really taking me out of the setting. I didn't know what the Salt Right was supposed to be. I had no idea what the Salt Right was supposed to be, so it was just the alt-right versus. It was Donald Trump alt-right versus everybody else, and that wasn't a core part of the setting. And it's not like I have anything against right-wing politics. I don't. Or Donald Trump. I don't always agree with him. But it's just that wasn't what the game was. And it was turning from Yoon Suin into something else. And I get that is
the worst part of America, right?
Yeah.
That political
It was turning that was taking me out of it. And I honestly should have been more prepped with having encounter tables for each region, because the DMs, bless their heart, were doing their best with what they were given, and they Holyfield, he didn't really from what we were chatting, he doesn't feel like players understand the milieu. I think I'm using that word right.
Milieu is how I say it. I don't know if that's right either, but
he doesn't understand how to pronounce the monsters, and he doesn't think the players understand the monsters. Like if I tell someone a Bahoot's standing in front of you, his explanation was the person doesn't immediately have an idea of what that is. Whereas if he's like, there's a lizard dog-like thing standing in front of you, a kobold, the player immediately knows what that is, and then he can go back and sort of reframe it in a Yunsuni thing in his session recaps. So you had him putting monsters. You had both DMs putting monsters in areas where it's like reading the bestiary as thoroughly as I was. It's like clear that they're not there, but it's not their fault because I didn't provide character. I didn't provide encounter tables, and the game didn't provide encounter tables. So you got alligators out in the middle of the ocean on an island biting people's heads off.
Who drew this picture? This is awesome.
Yeah, that was, what was her name? She was actually one of my favorite players.
It's hilarious. Like the look on his face as he's getting snarfed is perfect. Everyone's swinging and the thing just jumps around and bites him. I love it.
I can't remember. I don't want to slow things down. I can't remember her name. It was the Visitor. It was Salt Mommy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the Visitor.
Yeah, the Visitor. They were the one who drew that. It was an awesome session. I legitimately had fun, even though I died.
So, okay, here's my question. You see on the left side of the screen there, it's a little flyer that I made for the League of the Road. And in my mind, I had some perks. Like, you join us, you get a magical tattoo when you join. And my idea was the tattoo had a chance. It had 1 in 6 chance if you drop to 0 hit points that it would bring you back 1 hit point. So you roll a d6. If you hit a 1, you come back. Otherwise, you're just dead or whatever. But the other thing it did was if you did drop to 0, it would put a red dot on the master map that we had at the League of the Road. And then the idea was that we would send a party to go rescue you. Right?
That's a really cool concept. And then
I had fun with it. But I thought one of the biggest things, I was going to get money from training people. Right? Because I was thinking AD&D first edition, when you get ready to level up, you don't just level up in that one. You have to come back to town and you have to find a trainer.
And that was my attention.
Yeah. But that's not in OSE, right? Like that was a rule set you would have had to bolt onto it. Because if you don't have that, if people just, like a video game, like the sparkles go up and then they go up a level, that's something that a patron can't offer that they could have otherwise. Right. And so we were like, I think you and Crossface were like, well, let's add that in there to make it more interactive with the patrons and the players. So part of my question is, do you think that you may have chosen the wrong system for what you were trying to do in OSE? And the other thing is, it sounds like Yoon Suin itself might have fought with the patrons. Like, if you had to do it again, system and setting, do you I mean, I know you love Yoon Suin, and it is a fascinating place, but do you think that maybe that was also fighting what you had going on with a huge Braunstein?
That's a tough question. I'll answer system first.
Okay.
System, it would have been more helpful if OSE had more rules like what you're talking about there, with leveling.
Does OSE have gold for XP?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So OSE is just BX D&D.
Okay. I'm a noob, so I don't.
Yeah,
OSE what I've played.
OSE is BX D&D. BX D&D is the basic essentials. I think it came out in the 70s. Yeah, so OSE is just a retro clone of BX, and BX is the most popular.
And I'm not trying to knock it or anybody that plays it. all I know is what I know. So I'm like being
So,
fresh at this.
coming out of this, I knew I wanted to keep playing Yoon Suin. So I
Yeah.
don't think the setting was the issue. I think I tried bolting on a Braunstein with players who didn't understand the milieu yet. Not that they couldn't understand it, but they hadn't been in enough sessions to understand what the milieu is. Because not everybody's going to read this 300-page tome like I am.
Yeah.
Even DMs, I shouldn't expect that, and I didn't even really expect that at the time. Part of me hoped they would, but I can't really expect that. So my goal coming out of this was I'm just going to solo play this because that's probably the best way I'm going to get enjoyment out of that. So looking into that, I started to look into advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And I've so far have only gotten through the player's handbook because I'm in college and I don't have a lot of free time. So I've not even gotten to race yet in here. But
Are you doing first or second edition?
It would be first edition.
Okay.
But there are things I like about it. I really like how you can zero prep a dungeon and how you can zero prep terrain. And I took that and I put that in to the Topaz Isles by figuring out, okay, this demi-plane in the Topaz Isles, what are all the hex types in it? What's the likelihood that moving from one hex to the other, you're going to end up in this terrain type or whatever? And I did that for the Topaz Isles of themselves or whatever. And I think the if you want to show that, that's on the table of contents somewhere. But so I took that and I've done my best to implement that, and I haven't gotten a chance to play test that. But as I'm getting deeper and deeper into advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm talking to people like Alchemical Raker about how to convert the monsters and the class of crabmen to this, it's a lot. Like that, I thought Thaco was difficult. Apparently, there's some segment system with initiative if there's surprise.
And then charging also affects it. And then
didn't know about that. Yeah. We're learning things every day.
So, if you charge, you don't need an initiative because the charge goes. Well, I think there's missile fire goes first, and then the charge, and then when you charge, it's about weapon length. Like whoever's got if you've got a 13-foot pike, it doesn't matter if they're charging you. You got a chance at hitting them first, right? So it is a lot of specific systems, and it's not easy to learn quickly,
right?
At least for me.
So even if I wanted to switch to advanced Dungeons and Dragons, which I think would be neat, I don't know if I could do it justice.
Dude, that would be like jumping off a cliff and building a plane on the way down.
I wouldn't be able to do my players justice. I wouldn't even be able to do myself justice in a solo play. And so I'm like, maybe I'll just stick with OSE for now. I get it. I'm lame. I'm not advanced like Crossface or Jeffro. But
I wouldn't say you're lame. I'm farther along in this, I'm closer to the grave than you are, and I am still learning first edition, right? Because I'm Johnny come lately to this. So don't feel like you're lame for not knowing the Mount Everest of role playing games. I feel like it's not easy to learn, but there is so much there that can support anything that might happen. Because these guys were doing it every day, and like they were hosting multiple parties in the same world and that kind of thing.
Like one thing in here, in the game, we had a rule called, what was it? It was social rank. And I couldn't even run my own house rule right. But basically what it was your social, it was supposed to be that your social rank was 5, and say that you're talking to an NPC of 7, whatever the difference is determines what their reaction would be. So you wouldn't even roll in that instance. Like a social forum thing. Well, it ended up just being a bonus to your charisma bonus on top of reaction rolls. So slugmen who would have like a social rank of 8 would have horrifically great reaction rules because they get like a 21 reaction rule on a 12 or whatever.
They are the top strata in the Topaz.
Yeah.
Like
So anytime a Slugman PC would interact with an NPC, they would always get a favorable reaction.
yeah.
So that clearly didn't work. And then I'm asking about how if that rule would transfer over to AD&D as I'm looking into doing this. And they point me to a page and I read it, and Gary Gygax legit says, don't give them bonuses based on social rank. He says it plain in the text. They are, even if they're in the high strata, they're the low list of the lows. They have to earn their way up to that. And I'm like, wow. And so I start asking Jeffro and people about this and talking about how I can't even be bothered to run my house rule right. And Jeffro's like, well, if you can't even run your own house rule right, what's the point of including it? And it's like, mind blown. So it's like stuff like that, I would throw it out. But there's
as Lord Mateus has said, he said, I thought the social rank rule was great. It needed work, but it really fit the setting. And part of it is it's an Eastern mindset, like a save face culture, and you got a bunch of Western guys trying to fit our heads into it. So we needed something, right? We needed something.
And maybe there's something that me and Lord Mateus or somebody else can work on. Like there's somebody on Twitter who's showing me the social rank system, and I think it was Greyhawk or something, and they would just attach your social rank, you get that times X for starting gold, and that's what it was.
Okay.
So maybe it's
and you
had
a rule like that for like when I played a Slugman, he got like the highest he got the max you could.
Yeah, so
for gold.
The problem with the social rank thing is Yoon Soon is mainly influenced by India, and India has an extremely strict caste system. Yes. So much so, if you look into the real life caste system of India, the different castes, which no longer exist according to the Indian government, are technically different races. Like they're so interbred and separated from each other that they don't share the same DNA for thousands of years.
Wow.
They're practically different ethnicities. So
a very hard thing to legislate away.
How to legislate that into a game, not only mechanically, but from a player perspective, where you're a Westerner and caste is very, very foreign to you, even as a GM who's trying to do their best to read about it. Like the 6 different types of Buddhism are like weirdly woven into this, and I don't even understand what the 6 different types of Buddhism are.
But you know the difference between a Slugman and a human and a Crabman, right?
Yeah. So
it's elegant.
It's how do you mechanically represent that without making X race the only playable race, or handicapping the other players so they don't feel like they can actually do anything. And then how do you...
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I forgot.
I was just going to say, I feel like that is one of the weakest parts of 5e right now. Like, you will have a race like the Tiefling that it specifically tells you, if you pick this, people won't trust you. Right? And then you'll try to play something like Curse of Strahd, and it will tell you, well, the villagers don't like outsiders, and if they don't look human, then they really don't like them. And then someone picks a Tiefling because they think it's cool, and then you're trying to live up to that, and you're bullying them.
That's what's most impressive about AD&D to me. Even if I don't end up playing it, Gary Gygax already knew the answer to this thing we've been struggling with for the last 5 years. He already had the answer, and it blows my mind. And it's like, okay, this is clearly a great system, but I don't understand how to read it. And yeah, cool. You can, people like Crafty, I love Crafty, they can read college textbooks for fun. This thing reads like a college textbook. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm
high Gygaxian,
right? Maybe it's my generation and we're not very good at reading or literate or whatever it is, but this is difficult for me to read. I have to take my time with this. So I'm sorry. Even after taking my time with it, I'm probably not going to understand THAC0, or I'm not going to understand attack matrices, because I guess this doesn't use THAC0, but it does use THAC0 in some supplements, but only in the monsters. I don't understand. Big, old, convoluted thing. Why? Okay, but it's both very stream of thought, which I appreciate, but it's also very textbooky in the way that it's laid out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
All right.
what to answer your question, would I love to play Yoonsoon with AD&D? Yes. Do I think it's possible? At the moment, no. Next year, I'm not sure.
Okay, and that's fair. Here's one of my questions though too, because it may be that I feel like something like Adventure Conquer King system or First Edition is best suited to this kind of massive Braunstein thing. But have you seen the film Secrets of Blackmore?
No.
Okay, it's
I tried.
brilliant.
So I'm gonna catch flack for this.
Oh, here we go.
But
I realize you're a college kid and you don't have a whole lot of free time on your brain. Like,
so
I remember when I was going for my master's, the only reading that I did for pleasure was audiobooks driving back and forth to classes and work and stuff. So
yeah, I'll listen to audiobooks while I work at Amazon. But with Secrets of Blackmore, the guy, from what I understand, hasn't been very friendly towards the ideas of the BROSR. Yet the BROSR holds him up as a Da Vinci or whatever.
They love him for this movie, but here's where I think it comes back to the stuff that happened ahead of us. Like, they did something, they made somebody upset, they were rude or whatever, and I feel like he got caught in it and he was like, I'm just not even going to deal with it. But I still feel like what he created was amazing. I've got a friend at work who says that Griff was one of the top 5 DMs that he's ever played for. And
wow.
I'm hoping Griff wants to come on this show because I got a lot of questions for him as well.
Yeah.
But apart from all of that, I'm not trying to get back into the controversy or whatever. But the reason I bring it up is he talks about the formation of what we have come to know as this role-playing game, and it starts with a man named David Wesley, and he started the first Braunstein. And the first time he did it, he felt like a failure. Right? He had this stuff all he had it all planned out, and he was sitting in one room and he sent them into another room and they came in one at a time, and he was going to like move them on the map and tell them what was going on, and it quickly got out of hand for him. And he felt like it was a failure, and his players said, this was amazing, we want to do this again. So the very first time the DM got overwhelmed, right?
Yeah, and that's what I experienced.
They've done it a couple more times. And so my question is this just like a Sisyphean task? Is the main Braunstein thing, is it something that you don't want to do it all the time forever? Like, you do it for a little bit and then let that set up a ton of hooks for you, and you say, all right, now it's time for the players, and they work their way through, and then when the game reaches some kind of stasis that you need to upset again, then you bring in some more patron players.
That's a really interesting idea.
And just let it be like breathing in and out, where like you get equilibrium, and then you upset it, and then you get because I feel like anybody that's really tried this has burned out. I feel like your experience is not because you're young. It's not because of the system you chose or the setting. And I may be wrong in this, so please let me have it in the chat or straighten me out. But I feel like the especially with 30 patrons, I feel like it's scooping the fire of the gods and then being surprised when it runs out of control. And the ones that I feel like are very successful, like Brovenloft or like Decembork, John Mollison, Mr. Wargaming, he specifically said, we're going to do this for a month. Here's the win conditions. Here's your, places on the map. Go nuts. But everyone knew this was coming to an end. And I don't think Decembork was plugged into any other ongoing campaign. So that's my question. I don't know the answer. That's why I'm talking to you guys that have like been behind the curtain and done this. What do you think of that idea that like maybe this is just something by its nature?
It,
It is a force of chaos, and you need to balance it with law.
it is absolutely a force of chaos. I was wanting to say this earlier with when you were talking about alignment and how people don't get Jeffro and the kayfabe, and I think this applies here. With the 9-sided alignment table you see in modern day D&D, sometimes that isn't enough. And if you were to use one of those alignments to describe what the BROSR is, you'd have to go off a little bit, and you would probably describe them as either lawful chaotic or chaotic lawful.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that this playstyle is naturally chaotic. And thinking about what you're saying, if you're trying to put the one-to-one time, the patrons starting out from the very beginning and just letting them go nuts and then stopping that, I'm wondering if with that type of approach to this, if we'd have to do, okay, we play for 1 or 2 months or whatever with patrons only. Then we start back at day one, but all of that is history that's predetermined.
Yeah.
And then you just have those same patrons play players. And then if something comes up where it conflicts with the predetermined timeline or whatever, then you pull those patrons aside or something, and you're like, what do we do here type of thing.
Yeah.
And part of me is like, yeah, that might work out. But I don't know if that would work with one-to-one time unless you were stopping time between sessions. Because the way I understand one-to-one time, after so many times of trying to learn it, and so many times of people getting frustrated with me, like, this is a simple concept. What are you getting
Alexander McCreese has a good video on this, or two-part video.
His video actually helped a lot, but I'm thinking if you were to play that way you're saying, where you have the month of history and we play the month out and then we pick up history and see where that goes from there and then we go back. I'm thinking between sessions of the PC instead of patrons, you'd have to pause it, because if you're having 7 days pass between that, then that's 7 days of that history. And then you only get to play 4 sessions in that. How much are the players really going to change what's going on between the patrons at that? So I wonder if you'd have to pause time between each session until you caught up to the 30-day mark. And then you'd have to go back and just do one-to-one time for 30 days and then go back and do the same thing. And I don't know if people would find that entertaining or not.
I think maybe having just a few patrons and saying what is the problem that we want solved with a patron. And for me, the answer is I want crazy, out of left field ideas that I would not have come up with trying to run the whole world.
Amen.
Yeah. So how do we get just a few of those? You say, all right, here's your guy. What is he up to? What's his overarching plan? So they give you just enough that you're like, okay, I know what this is. I can run this guy now. I will give him back to you if he's still alive when I need more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that might be the way to do it. And I didn't run it that way. And I'm kind of wishing I experimented and tried it that way of, okay, tell me what the PC is. Tell me what they have. Tell me what they're about. Tell me what they would do in these 5 example circumstances. And then it's mine again. And maybe I ask you once a week if they're doing anything odd.
And it's hard, and it's going to take a very mature player, because they are going to have to trust you with their guy. They are giving you some stuff, and then they're turning him over, right? And so that's where I think like the war game versus the player facing thing will come into it. Like, I don't know, Lord Mateus, let us know, like, if he had asked you to hand over Yanksa, he might have been like, no, man, I got too much going on. I can't trust you with him. Right.
Like Yanksa was Lord Mateus's baby, and somebody tried to assassinate Lord Mateus's second in command, and it drove him paranoid, way more paranoid than he already was.
He says I might have done it. He says he might have, but
So
He was
at that point,
paranoid.
he was just isolationist and building his resources. And the minute that happened, he switched over to, I am going to destroy everyone.
Scorched earth.
So I don't know if, because Lord Mateus was actually one of the more moderate players. He wasn't too bad. Like, we would butt heads every now and then, but he wasn't the worst. There were points of struggle, just like there were with every patron. Like with you, the struggle was, I'm not hearing anything from you.
This guy's not saying crap, and I need to hear because everyone's going through his area.
And everybody is like, what's going on over here? And I'm like, I don't know. What is going on?
You should have just been like, I don't know if you're getting this, Dunder Moose, but your guy just died. That would have made it so much easier for you. It's like, someone assassinated you. You are no longer in the game.
But it would have gnomes dipped in oil and lit on fire and launched as artillery. Yeah. This game,
it's so fun.
Was fun chaos. Like,
yeah,
I've taken so many ideas and tried to implement them within like just the Topaz Isle stuff that people were working on. I've taken people's monsters that they were coming up with. I've taken people's concepts for monsters and tweaked it.
Yeah.
Even the faction table with the stuff, all those events are based off stuff that was happening in game. So there's a lot that I learned about how this game could function and what was super exciting. It's just, how do you set up a Braunstein in a way where you have these factions going on in the background, you have this chaotic involvement from the players that out of left field ideas, like, oh, I'm going to turn my Knave's Nook little thing into Alcatraz, and everybody who lives there is going to be okay with it, and nobody outside of it is going to know that this place is nuts.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. And
man, I was building some of that nut stuff. Like, my idea was that, like, the domed palace that we were based in was actually on top of a long ancient crypt of outsiders, and so like
that was dope.
Everybody that came dope. Like spent the night there was going to have nightmares as these things were trying to reach out, and that was going to be the dungeon where, like, I don't know if maybe Lord Mateus was going to kill me first, but like I was going to try and play it like I was losing control of my own thing, and I needed the players eventually to come rescue me from what was taking over.
Yeah, Lord Mateus says that he was a god because he says so. With the way that we had a player who, it was a random encounter. This was one of the coolest things that happened in the session. Random encounter in downtime. They just came out of their session. They had a guy who was made catatonic because of something in the dungeon, and he's trying to figure out how to cure this player so they can get their spellcaster back. And so he goes and he's like, I need to find a priest to cure this guy or whatever. And he finds, I rolled up the tables according to the Yunsun source book and what I had, and he found this one priest of a dying religion. And from that, we took a concept that I hadn't really solidified in my idea, because Yunsun's supposed to have hundreds or thousands of gods.
Yeah.
Lots of them overlapping in domain. So what we came up with was, if you believe in it strong enough, it pretty much becomes a god, whether that's you saying you're a god or whatever. So if we
kept some force that's anonymous willing to step into that role, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So if we kept down that route, Yangtze, he might have legitimately rose into demigodhood or godhood.
Ascended.
He might have ascended. But I had so much going on that I couldn't even keep track of that thought in my head to, oh, wait, he says he's a god. His people are worshiping him out of fear like a god. He should be ascending This should
Yeah.
be like a hook that the players are like, what is going on over here?
Yeah.
Like, that should have been genuinely frightening.
That would have been amazing.
Stuff.
So,
And
okay, let's go back and armchair quarterback it a bit. Like, is there a way to open it and start the same way you did, and then just to say, I'm going to pick just a few of these patrons that are actually carrying the load, and I'm just going to fire the rest and say, there's a plague that's gone through the land, and you guys all died, without absolutely having everybody enraged. Probably not. There's probably no way.
I might have to do that, because having this epiphany that he could have risen to godhood is nuts and genuinely cool. So I originally planned to go back into Yoonsoon as a solo play. Then last Tuesday, I am thinking about the interview, and I see that Holyfield and all of them are in a chat, and I'm at work, and I just join. And for some reason, they're able to hear me over the machinery. So we just talked for the next 2 hours after their session about stuff I was upset about in the session, stuff I felt I could have done differently, all this stuff. And it makes me want to come back with, like, to the Topaz Isles, and I have all this stuff going on. But now what we're getting to here, that genuinely would be cool. Like Sar Bombadil, the guy with the consortium, he didn't really get to do a lot, but he was setting up some stuff that was pretty
he was setting up stuff with me in the background, so
like,
he was active. Yeah,
like you don't even know, like, so I don't think he's around anymore, so I don't feel too bad about spoiling this for him, but his concept was so cool. He took the liquid golem, which is a monster in it, and he said, I want to create a better version of this. I want a liquid golem that went inside somebody's body and took him over. And so his patron was a puppet the entire time.
Oh man.
Yeah. Like,
well, and that's hinted at in some of the tables. I don't know if it's from Yoonsoon or from your supplements, but it's him. Like, that's one of the things you could roll up, is that somebody, not a liquid goal. Like, that's very creative, but like,
it was insanely such a cool concept. It was great. And
is amazing.
No one had a clue. Like, I don't know. It was the Jarrell Slaver dude with their salt right thing. They just, I think I had it set up that they were naturally enemies, but they didn't even know that, maybe this guy is a problem. So you had a bunch of players like that were genuinely going to be, they were going to butt heads. And at the end of it, it would be like a nuclear blast. Like something would happen. Either Yang Raxa is suddenly a god, and you got to deal with the fallout of that, or you got this guy who's taking over people with ancient golem technology. Age of the Dwarfs, and we don't even know what the history of this is. And then you got guys like Sar Bombadil, who's like, oh, I'm just a studious professor, adding some of the coolest backstory, like the Sea Kings. Where did that come from? That's the coolest thing. I want to know who the Sea Kings are.
I mean, the mind just, I mean, I could just picture like Yangsa doing a face turn, right? When the outsider gets released and like comes erupting up through the league of the, the Travelers League, and it's like, hey, you're the only one powerful enough to stop this and save the Yellow City now, and he's got to decide whether he wants to become a good. There's the mind goes crazy. Let me ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ask, well, I don't want to cut us off if we're in the middle of something here. So maybe, I guess this is really cheesy. This is one of the things I do with all my guests. I ask to share a memorable session, and it could be from Yoonsoon or it could be anything else. Like, is there like one of the things that, like, when you think back to, like, this is why I play this game, this is why, so Monopoly or video games or nothing can touch it.
Second session I ran was both the worst and best session, and it's probably what broke me as a player. Okay. I don't feel bad exposing this person because he is probably the final straw for me. But we had a player who, in the first session he was everybody's favorite. He was my favorite. Holy chow. Everybody loves him. He was amazing. But
Careful now, you're touching a third rail with the silly names thing. But like, tell your story. We'll get to that.
Holy Chow, he either purposely was ignorant of how a Braunstein worked, and that he's like, oh, I'm suddenly in Lamorak, which is, to get here, I'd have to travel 14 days. It's like, oh no. Because he would just join the session halfway, and it's like, okay, now we have to somehow figure that in. So he did that.
Teleporting guy.
But because he was gone, I said, no, you can't use Holy Chow. So he comes up with a European character called Scott McDougal or whatever, which I already hated from the get-go. No idea why. Maybe because he's Irish. I don't know.
Because he didn't fit the setting, right? Like,
he didn't even fit the European setting. Like, we still hadn't even figured out what the European identity was, but it wasn't Irish. No one was like pulling an Irish like conquistador type thing. It was leaning more towards Spanish, maybe. But
all right,
he didn't fit in, and he brought in a lot of the BROSR silliness, or maybe just silliness in general. Because I've heard other DMs who were in the game as players or as DMs say they've had problems with this guy in the past, where he's like, okay, Scott McDougal, he's a paladin for McDonald's, and he has Tourette's. And now I, as the DM, who did not have the will or skill to say no, was like, fine. So now I have this guy shouting about my McNuggets as his form of Tourette's. It ruined the session for me, but at the same time, it was the best session because I had another patron who was running the fat crab.
Before you get to the good part, like, did the other players think that he was being funny, or was it kind of annoying to everybody, would you say?
I don't know, because they would laugh at his jokes. Okay. But this time, they didn't laugh at every joke. And I was physically groaning at some of the jokes. So I legit, after the session, I legit pulled him aside and I'm like, are you trying to break my game? Are you obviously trying to break the game? Okay, Lord Mateus was a player in that session. He says it was annoying. Like, so this character was tied up in the middle of everything that was going down that made this awesome, and the players completely ignored him. So maybe that speaks to how annoying he was. Like, as a player, he would show up halfway, pretty much unannounced, and I'd have to somehow incorporate him into the session. So I wouldn't even get to say no to see his character sheet beforehand and be like, yeah, no, this isn't going to work. Come up with something else. But then he'd do stuff like that where the players are like, well, I don't really want to engage with this. What made the session the best session, while also being the worst, was we had another patron who, Lord Mattias, as his patron, was making a loose alliance with. He was the fat crab, and he was trying to take over the old town and start a race war between the crabmen.
I was loosely aware of the fat crab.
Yeah, so he was trying to start a race war, and he was going to raid the entire city and raise it like Roman barbarians. So he was doing that, and he said, okay, today it was his action for the day. He said, today they are scouting the old city for dungeons and loot. I said, okay, cool. I rolled an encounter, ignored what the encounter table said, and was like, this is cooler what this patron does. I'm going to incorporate it because the patron's at the table, and it's just a cool concept. So they get cornered by crabmen. Lord Mattias over here, the only crabman, somehow convinces them to come to the dungeon with them. They go inside the dungeon, and they're very loosely aligned with the players, and they come across a giant beetle and her 12 offspring. So
I remember reading this session report.
We had 6 players, 8 crabmen, so that's 14 already, 12 giant beetles, and then a gigantic giant beetle.
Like the queen alien beetle.
Like Alien. And it turned into mass combat. And I've never done mass combat before. And they were the players were biffing their reaction rolls, but the crabmen were making up for it. So the crabmen are coming over here and they're legit snapping beetles in half, or they're tearing.
Crabmen are no joke in this system.
It was amazing. And then somehow Click Clack didn't biff his reaction roll, and the crabmen didn't turn on them, and they just left. And they were done. And so the players went on and did their own thing. But that was probably the most fun I've had playing D&D, was that one little encounter. Meanwhile, I'm also having the worst time ever because somebody who no one is engaging with is like, McNuggets, Szechuan sauce. And we're just like, stop. We're having the best time over here.
Yeah.
And looking back at it now, recounting this, it just occurred to me, I was the worst GM for not kicking him out of this session at that second. I should have said, hey guys, hold on.
It's hard to know that in the moment.
I should have dragged him into a separate channel and been like, hey man, it's not jiving today. I'm sorry. I need you to leave. And then I should have just gone back. And it would have been an amazing session because of that. I'd be like, oh no, it looks like the Beatles attacked him and he's dead. Oh well. Like that probably should have been what I did in hindsight.
You have to
but
play
I
with
was
people.
Already burnt out.
Yeah, you have to play with people who speak your alignment language. And there is a certain thing about I've played with fun players that are just hilarious. And
he was a funny guy.
There comes a point when it's not serving the party anymore, when it's self-serving, like an attention, look at me thing. And so I feel like both for patrons and for players, there's like, when you notice that sensitivity to other people having a good time along with you, that's pure gold. And if you don't have it, it's an issue.
And I think a big part of that is I was the only one with face cam. So I didn't have anybody's facial reactions to go off when he did his stupid Tourette's thing to be like, oh, this is a problem.
Yeah. And you don't know if people playing might deal with that and it hits different. You know what I mean? Like, I don't make a big deal out of this, but my son has Down syndrome, and people use certain language or put on in like, you know what? I thought that stuff was funny too before I had a kid with Down syndrome. And like, I'm not trying to harsh anybody, but like that word hits so hard right now and it like kicks me right out. You know what I mean? So when people start getting into like the salt right or making fun of something that somebody legit can't help, some people will just laugh along and think it's fun, but they're as a DM, I would always just kind of get an edge up, like, oh, I don't know if everyone's okay with this, and if they're not okay with it, I don't know if they'd even feel comfortable sharing that they're not okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but to get back to that one question you were asking about, if I would involve patrons again, maybe 3 or 4 I'd pick, and then I'd be
people that know what they're doing and have proved themselves.
People that know what they were doing, or that in Lord Mateus's case were really good, and it was just my fault as an inexperienced DM that we were having conflict. Like, now that I know that patron play should just really be solo play, and they should be rolling upon the tables and then being like, hey, I did this today, and if I see an issue with it, I'm like, okay, maybe let's reevaluate this or something. If I had known that going in, and if I was able to communicate that to Lord Mateus, he would have been the 3rd best player. Like, he genuinely would have been the 3rd best player. But because I was inexperienced and we had miscommunications, he just became a really good patron that was sometimes frustrating to deal with. So yeah, I would definitely put him on my roster. I'd put Sar Bombadil. I'd put the Mother faction, and I'd either move them into the Yellow City, or I'd find a way to put them in the Topaz Isles and get them involved with the players. But yeah, I'd pick those guys, and I'd be like, okay, you guys can be patrons. I'm probably going to say no to a lot of things to you. I'm sorry ahead of time. Every other faction, I'm just going to roll on a table.
Yeah.
And we're going to have fun with that. Like, saying
the
that now,
patrons
that
serve
genuinely
you as a
sounds
DM. I'm sorry, what did you say?
saying that now, that genuinely sounds fun and like something I could do, but I don't have the Yellow City rebuilt out. Like there's playing this game proved that there were cracks in the foundation. One, how does transportation work? Players kept asking that. I kept biffing it. And then
Ride with cockroaches.
When it came down to the boats, I had priced them wrong. Like some player had to be like, okay, I'm going to redo all the boats for you. And he did. And I've implemented some of that into the Topaz Isle supplement. But I had stuff broken from the get-go with the Yellow City. The factions. I shouldn't have allowed monstrous factions within the Yellow City. It really should have just been a trade cartel thing.
Yeah.
But 17 is too many patrons.
Yeah.
So it would have to be a rolled table thing. So I'd have to build a rolled table based off of how the campaign went down and how I feel the what is it? The cartels should act, merging those two together to create something new. Also, with the factions earning money, we had a couple factions who were like, okay, I am an opium cartel. I'm going to order opium. Okay, I'm an opium cartel, but I also have access to pirates. I put my pirates here. And then I got so distracted with the milieu of 17 patrons talking to me a day that I completely forgot about that. And then suddenly this player's like, okay, my opium barge has arrived. I'm selling it. And I'm like, oh, crap. I was supposed to run a pirate encounter and crap was supposed to go down.
Yeah.
Now it didn't happen. I've robbed that player of that. I've robbed you of a potential victory. It's when I realized stuff like that was happening, I genuinely started to break because I'm like, I'm not doing my job properly. I don't have the encounter tables for the other DMs. I'm making their job more difficult. I am not keeping good track of what's going on, even though I have now just set up a downtime lock and I have all this stuff and I'm constantly reminding players.
It's overwhelming.
Stuff. It was too much. So while I really, really, really like the idea of bringing Lord Mateus or Sam Bombadil or the Yellow Mother back, I'm nervous. I don't know if I could handle it because I'm a busy guy. Like my schedule is booked. When I say Saturday is the only day I can play, it's pretty much the only day I can play now. Mondays.
Well, I mean, it's worth noting we did start this in the summertime, right? Like
yes. And even in the summertime, it was a lot.
So that might be why it's like, okay, Christmas break, summertime, just for a month or just for 4 weeks or 3 weeks or how, like, just pick a time, pick a set number that you can manage. You know, the first time you played it was the first sweep of the radar, right? You were trying to find value. You were learning the patron.
I learned that people really like the Topaz Isles on the patron front. I learned that I need to reevaluate some cracks in the Yellow City's foundation. And I learned that this is a lot of patrons. I need to either abandon the concept of patrons or revisit it entirely.
I think even a small amount of patrons will go, because there's a lot of stuff that happens in the fog of war. And there's a lot of stuff where we're talking to each other and you may not even be aware of what's going on. You know, like it gets out of hand. So let's get back to the kind of clickbaity thumbnail I put here. Was it worth it? Are you glad that you did it? Or was BROriental Adventures a mistake?
If you asked me a month ago, I would have said, and I did say on Twitter, that Jeff Rose a grifter. This doesn't work. This is the worst possible idea that you can do. Turn away now. Sitting here, even though I did pull a muscle, I did get stronger as a DM for it. Like I now understand that I do need to say no to players. Like coming from a Crossface said it, that coming from a 5e mindset, most 5e, it's even amongst the YouTube where it teaches you how to play, you don't say no to players. You're like, how can I work with this player to make this
the
content?
yes and, right?
Yes, and it's not no. And you need to say no. And I'm hoping that I can learn to flex that muscle, because I now know I need to use that muscle. Do I know how to use that muscle? I'm not sure I know how to use that muscle.
I feel like it would be really fun to get good at that muscle.
Yeah. Hey, can I eat a banana? My player eats a banana. No, you didn't pack any rations.
No. It's like in Aladdin when the genie says, "Ask for anything, ask for anything," and he's like, "Give me the Nile."
Except these 3 things.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So if I had asked you a while ago, you just said
say I didn't see it. Sorry.
Let me throw that back up there. He said, day 30, do 30 days of pure Braunstein that sets the stage for your players who are playing the rest of the year for regular sessions, like you said. But here's another thing he said. He said, I had no idea what I was doing. So that's a point I want to make. You were learning as a DM. Your patrons were also figuring things out. I feel like so much of Twitter is fake.
I'm doing my part.
Yeah. Would you like to know more? So much of Twitter is fake, where everyone is so certain and, this is the way you do it. And, you're a heretic if you don't. But like when I actually play with people that are doing it, like the BROSR methods, I find a lot of experimentation, a lot of false steps, and a lot of learning. And that's what I'm excited for, is I want to rediscover. For some of us, I'd say people like Rick Stump have been playing it this way all along, and like he probably is mystified, but there are a lot of I feel like the old ways are in some certain cases better, and that we have lost a lot because of our culture, because of our literature, because of the rules. And
so on the Rick Stump thing, that's the only of your streams that I've gotten to watch. Okay. It does seem like he's playing with an OSR method, but I think he speaks a completely different alignment language. So he doesn't realize it, and the BROSR doesn't realize it. And I think that's why they butt heads sometimes, even though they're talking about the exact same concepts.
Yeah. Well, and so there's another BROSR guy named B-Dubs, and he once said, and I'm going to butcher this quote because I don't have it in front of me, but he said that D&D is not a game of rules, it's a game of men. So getting back to that idea where you have to say no to people and stuff, sometimes it's like the person may say, well, I should be able to because this and this. And like you said, you just take them aside and say, man, I know that you're having fun. I know what you're trying to do, but it is hurting the game. And I can't allow that. And so I either need you to go in a different route, or for the good of my other players, we're gonna say this one, we gave it a shot and it didn't work out. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Like they're towards the later end, and I was already pretty much mentally checked out at this point. There was a player that came in, with a patron player that came in while we're on day 20, and they're like, I want to be a patron. I'm like, okay, sure. And their concept, it was neat, but I don't think it would fit. They wanted sea nomads, but they wanted them all to be Cyclops.
Okay.
And yeah, Cyclops live in the mountains. They're not really on the ocean. I'm legit asking this dude, how did they get there? Okay. And he was wanting them to flood the economy with fake gold and then get away with as many real magic items that they could from the Yellow City. He wanted to economically pillage the Yellow City and then all that fake disappear a week after he left. I was like, that's a neat concept, but we're 20 days in.
Yeah.
People are checking out already. I'm checked out already. And Cyclops don't fit here.
Yeah.
And that's also a lot of power to give that character. Like the spell he was asking for, I think when we looked it up, it wasn't even a OSE spell. I'm pretty sure it was an AD&D spell. It was like an 8th level illusionist spell.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you don't have to yes and everything. You could say, man, that's a great idea. Just too far into it. It wouldn't.
But I was so checked out. I was like, yeah, sure. And then
whatever, go nuts, kid.
I'd say no to this, or this. I'd get crossface. I'd be like, I know I need to say no, but I'm tired. So I'd be like, Holyfield, crossface, deal with this guy. And then I'd go do it with something else.
Yeah.
So he never ended up coming to fruition. He ended up just dropping off the radar. So we didn't need to worry about that. But
so here's another question that occurs to me, because like when this whole thing started, I was talking to Jeff Rowe and he was like, you should look at this. I had done just a little bit of Braunstein stuff with a low-level character named Foam the Gnome. He was an illusionist thief. He was only level 1 illusionist, level 2 thief. But we had a lot of fun and done some crazy stuff together. And he's like, I think you would be a good patron. I think you'd enjoy this. And so that's why I jumped in. And oh crap, my brain. Where was my question?
Foam the Gnome.
Before Foam the Gnome, the last thing you were talking about.
I don't know, chat. Do you know?
Yeah, come on. I'm sorry. It's late. It's midnight for me here. I can't. I hate my brain right now. It'll come back to me. Let me get to my last question that I have written down, and then we can wrap up, or we can keep the conversation going if it goes in a different direction. Do you feel like you are, in some senses, misunderstood? And if you are, what do you think is the one thing people get wrong about you?
About me?
Yeah.
That I was doing this wrong. Yes, I had house rules. Yes, some of them didn't function. But I don't think that's why I burnt out with the game. I think it's like you were saying, it's genuinely so chaotic.
Did you take on like some guilt for the way that it turned out, that like maybe was unfair for you because
I feel awful. I feel awful. I let down 67 people when I pulled out, man. Like, I did not want to pull out, but I legit knew if I kept going, it would become the worst game anyone's ever played.
Yeah.
There was a session I was supposed to run, and I legit dropped it like an hour or two before the session was supposed to run because some people were going to get hamburgers. Like, I wasn't feeling up to interacting with people on the server, and there's these people I haven't talked to in a month or two, and they're getting hamburgers, and they invite me, and I'm like, yeah, I want hamburgers.
Right on.
Like, I legit just dropped it because I felt like it at that point, and I don't want the game to be that to me. I don't want it to be a burden where I feel like I let down somebody or I can't even be bothered to show up. And that was probably what made me realize I need to pull out.
Yeah. So thanks for being open and sharing that. It did remind me of the thing I was going to ask, and it's pertinent. How much of this hobby, how much of our time and attention should it take up?
Not 8 hours a day.
I mean, it can, and that's the thing about it that's fascinating.
Like I probably spend too much time thinking about building encounter tables or writing lore or creating demi-planes. Like, I probably should tone it back in some instances, but it's nowhere near as
well. That's what I was going to say when I got off track, was that I thought that playing a patron would be less time than playing a player.
That's what I thought. I thought, oh, hey, we have all these patrons. I don't even need to DM. I show up an hour before the session, look at my sheet, and it tells me all what happened this week, and then we just roll the dice. That's not what it turned out to be.
Right.
It's not what it was.
So the bottom right meme on here was mine on Twitter, and I said, I joined as a patron thinking that, because I thought if I was a player, that's like 4 hours a week, like one night a week, 4 hours, I'm going to be playing this. And I just didn't have room for that. And I thought, well, I'll be a patron. It won't be as much. And then like, you can see the text over here was, I don't have time to be a player. I'll just be a patron, and then I spend all my time skilling up, learning the system, thinking about what's going on, paranoid about what Mateus is doing at my board. Like, I spent way more time, and it's like so maybe that kind of brings it full circle back around to the Christianity thing, and like I don't I don't know if our parents were right about the whole satanic panic thing, but like there is a very real sense, and I'm only speaking for myself here. I'm not trying to convict anybody other than my own self, but I feel like there is a sense where this is a game that is fascinating enough to become an idol in my heart. And I'm wondering like how do we get the good out of it without spiraling,
I,
without too much focus.
I was really trying to prevent that from happening because, like, I've said in Ryan Howard's stream, like I've really struggled with, is this an idol or is this not? Is this okay for me to play? Is this not type of thing in the past?
Yeah.
And so I was going into every session like openly praying for like 10 minutes or before the session or whatever. But
Yeah.
I just it was definitely too much. And even though I was trying to be a good example for my players who may not necessarily be of faith or whatever, I still failed. And there's definitely a spiritual component of that where if I'm being burnt out, then I'm either putting too much of my energy into something, or I'm not putting enough of my energy to something else, which it will feed me.
Yeah.
And so I obviously wasn't being fed. So
And there's something about the public aspect of it, like knowing there's people on Twitter, knowing there's all these like that you almost feel like you need to, even if it's like, well, I wouldn't be interested in doing this. Like I gotta whomp it up for them because there's so many people involved.
yeah, like I had a problem cussing before this, and then Jeff Rose talking about how, oh, I'm the greatest gamer since Gary Gygax or whatever, or and only Christians can play a game to the caliber that the curator is playing, or oh, God only blesses a game like this to such a degree if you're a Christian. You're like, okay, I can't be cussing anymore. I got like
That's hilarious.
are on me, and it's like
He gets hyperbolic. I love the guy.
like,
He's not everyone's cup of tea, and I'm fine with that too. But
like I get it. I get that it's all a meme and a joke now. But,
Twitter's all fake.
But
fake.
in the heat of it, I was taking everything he was saying about that seriously. I'm like, oh, this dude genuinely believes this. And I was freaking out. Because I'm like, the minute I disappoint him, I'm going to have half of OSR D&D Twitter angry at me.
Oh, man. Well, see, and that was one of the things, like, I wanted to get to the meat of what happened. I was worried. I don't want this to be something that puts a target on your back. I don't want this to be part of the war of this is the best way to play or not. And if it didn't work, that means it doesn't work or anything. I just wanted, and I feel like I've gotten that out of you, is like just your honest experiences of what you've gone through and what you, and I feel like you've got a great handle and just a humble perspective on looking back on it. I do feel bad that you felt like you let people down and that was a weight on you, because in my mind, you were experimenting, you were trying something, you were learning something new. Everybody that was along for the ride were doing the same, and you did not owe any of us anything. In my eyes, I can't tell you how to feel or who to be on the internet or anything like that. But from my perspective, I enjoyed what you did, and I did not feel let down or that you were failing the cause or that we should take the banner back. You're not allowed to put bro in your title or anything like that. Again, I'm a Johnny come lately, so I don't speak for everyone, and feel free to disagree with me. But like, I hope that you can, as we've talked about this stuff and like processed it, I hope you can let yourself off the hook a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate that, man. I think the only person I've openly seen that's been like, oh, curator sucks because of that was B-Dubs, because they made a tweet where they said what did they say? They said they basically like quote. They did. I gotta go to Twitter here now to find, because it was under the hashtag
Was it the
BROriental.
one like I think the one that I remember seeing was imagine thinking you can quit that's not, I can't remember.
Okay, that you reminded me of that multiple times. He was doing it then. So if I did hashtag BROriental Adventures, and then I did not spell that right. Sorry.
Well, so if anybody's watching this and you feel sympathetic to my point of view, please don't at Curator. He honestly tried something. He gave it his best, and he came
Okay.
out here and was brave enough to share how it went for him. So it doesn't prove or disprove any theories or positions.
So some guy I don't know, so I'm not going to say who he is, says yes, and their delicate sensibility is not so much about what's being said, it's how it's said. And if approved source TM told them the same in a more palatable way, they'd spurg less. Got to check the ego to learn something that conflicts with your status quo. B-Dubs responds to, whenever the BROSR is nice, disaster happens. Hashtag BROriental Adventures. So yeah, there were multiple times where where B-Dubs was like, oh, this isn't going to do well. And then I've even seen into part of their little stuff that some people from like week one were like, yeah, this is going to fall apart.
So, and I wonder why they like. I wonder if they thought because you were using OSE and that wasn't a full system, or
the person who said it was going to fall apart, I think I only got to see like a very small snippet, but I think it was just because of how large it grew, like overnight, and that it was just going to get chaotic. Like Crossface was telling me that afterwards that like, yeah, everybody knew it was going to fall apart because these things normally don't last past a month. Games of this scale don't go beyond a month. Like Trollopulus or whatever has got like only 12 players or whatever, and you got like 67, and it's like, okay.
Well, so here's the thing that I'm learning, and I've got a lot to learn, and I want to talk to a bunch of people that have done it, and I want to talk to B-Dubs, I want to talk to Jeffro, I want to talk to Calvitis, the guy that does BROriental. I got a thesis that this, and I've shared with you that it spins out of control, and it makes people burn out, and it makes them step away from the game. And so I'm not saying it's wrong to do it, that this isn't the right way to play, but it just means we need to figure out how to do it in a way that works, how to do it in a way that, because like you said, as we were talking about some of the stuff that came out, like our faces lit up, we thought it was hilarious, and there's so much excitement about it. But I think this is the way, is through experimenting and then sharing what we've learned. And so, okay, I'm not going to do this. I would say that this was a historic campaign. I don't know anybody that started off with 60 or more players all jumping in at the same time. And so, however it went, however it turned out, it deserves respect just for that. Let me catch up with the chat. I'm way behind.
Yeah. Brian James asked me a question, I think. It's far up
there. Let me see, Brian. Oh, here it is. Hey, Curator. What if you left the option open for doing the 30-day marathon for the start of the summer break in 2024?
Are you asking like if I do it like I did? Because I'd probably, if I did this all over again, you're only getting like one move per patron per week. So you're getting like 4 moves. Is that something you really want to do?
Someday I will tell you the story of Foam the Gnome and what happened. That's like a lot of it's still in the fog of war. But so here's the thing, like basically I had to set up a heist against a table of face-to-face players. I think there's 6 of them, and they had some dragon eggs that they were trying to haste to come to maturity. so that they would have 3 blue dragons, like adult blue dragons that were imprinted on them. And my job was to try and steal those eggs. And so I came up with a step-by-step plan of what was going to happen, and I gave it to Jeffro, and I realized, and this, you got to realize, Foam the Gnome is like one of my favorite characters of all time. And I realized in handing this over that the most likely outcome was they were going to figure out what was happening and they were going to kill him. And like my favorite character was going to die off stage from my point of view for the good of the campaign, for the good. And like, so I wrestled with that. And when I said, let's do this and handed it over, it led to some of the most rewarding gameplay I've ever had. And so I feel like there is a lot here, but it has to be handled right. And I feel like from what I've seen, and it's not much, I'm new at this stuff, from what I've seen, a limited approach where you just get a few interactions from the patrons. You get just enough of the chaos to do something that throws your equilibrium off. And then it's very interesting to see how the players react to that chaos and how they try to bring it back to equilibrium. So like that short, limited steps, playing one group against the other, even player versus player can get some of that elements of it, and then you just turn off the spigot, because I feel like anybody, even the most experienced, I mean, Rick Stump doesn't do that stuff. 44-year campaign, he knows about it, he's tried everything, right? And he's like, no, I'm gonna run the NPCs, thank you very much. So it's like, I don't want you to feel bad that it's spun out of control or that people said, oh, this isn't going to work, because I feel like this is something that, for all of the joy and excitement that it delivers, it also comes with a price.
Yeah.
But I'm still learning, and I may be wrong about that, and I'm willing to talk to anybody that wants to come on here.
Like, there's got to be a way to capture that excitable, chaotic energy of, oh, my players said they're gonna what's something that happened? My player said, oh, they're gonna go talk to the yellow mother. Okay, cool. Says hello. Instantly, another faction is enslaved. That's something that I wouldn't normally come up with as a GM. It'd be like, if I was in those shoes, it'd be like, oh no, that guy already knows you don't go near the island witches or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that Lord Mateus, can I read it off?
Please.
He says, BROriental Adventures probably contributed more to a BROSR discourse than any other game. I have no idea. After it, I was so done with BROSR Twitter, I didn't pay attention for a month. So I have no idea.
How important is session reports to this style of play?
Oh, it's definitely instrumental. Like, even if I don't stick with Braunstein, I'll stick with the whole session report thing, just because it's like Rick Stump was saying. I don't quite understand how he can keep track that a player's got like 2,000 copper sitting on a log over here, but yeah, you can look back to that stuff, and that's what happened.
He recently posted a picture of his shelf, and it's like a whole shelf of just spiral-bound notebooks that are filled up.
Yikes.
Yeah. And he's going to leave them to his kids. He's like, if you guys want to keep this going after I'm gone, you can. So it's pretty amazing.
He said he was keeping notes during his session. Like, I don't know how he did that, because Lord Mateus was one of my main note keepers, and our sessions were so fast or chaotic that it just, I would sit there for maybe 3 or 4 hours trying to remember what happened and then decipher it from his notes to get the narrative like play. Because cool note that says, oh, the players went here and did this, they fought these many guys, they got this treasure. That's not very interesting to me. I kind of want to feel like I was at the table if I'm reading it back, and that's how I try to write my session reports. So it's like, what's going on?
There is something about the session reports that, I mean, that's just something you need to realize. your game master just used all of their brain power and all of their words for like a 4 to 6 hour session, and then after you log off, they got to sit down and type it up and remember everything that happened and get it right. And the last one I was talking to Vomitron, and I was asking what is the time frame you want on a session report, and he's like, the next day if you can, probably within 3 days is the limit, because but the good thing is other people can see, we call it keeping the receipts, right? Other people can see what you have learned, what's happened, and then you can go back and reference it. But with the Braunstein thing, there is so much that is in Fog of War that you don't want to just put out there, because then you could wreck somebody else's stratagems and stuff, right?
Yes. So let me look at the master log, and I can see if I can find some of that as examples.
Because while you're looking that up, I'm gonna comment on Black Lodge Games comment there. They said if you stream the games on YouTube, the full session lasts for all time. Some of the sessions from the Vampire the Masquerade YouTube experiment from 2013 to 2014 era still exist. Yeah, if you've got people that are willing to do that, hey, that's awesome. The guys that I play with face to face would not be comfortable coming on YouTube and sharing that experience. But I do got to say, I respect Black Lodge Games. I feel like sometimes they butt heads with a lot of the people that are in the BROSR, but they always keep showing up and sharing valuable perspective, and they're part of the conversation and they're there. And these are some of the guys where I think about, like, if you're just in the fake Twitter thing and you take sides, you will probably discount some of the stuff that they know about this game because you've decided you want to do Twitter war and win that instead of actually learning how to game better and stuff. So, and also I want to throw out there, Black Lodge Games encouraged me to even start my channel in the first place. So I appreciate you guys. Hopefully I haven't said or done anything that's upset you from your point of view or whatever, but I'm glad you're here. So did you find it?
Yes. To speak on the Black Lodge thing, I like the video that they did on the stream that they did on the BROSR's ideas. Yeah, it is a bit harsh and all that, but I feel like the BROSR could take it, and some of their criticisms are valid. The Muppetlantis criticism, I was laughing along with them because they make a really valid point. If this is what you're putting in the forefront as this is what you're trying to tell 5e gamers or OSR gamers or new SR gamers, that this is the pinnacle of gaming, and sure, that may be kayfabe and that may be an alignment language, but you also got to understand you're speaking to people who don't speak your alignment language. If you're telling them that, they're going to laugh at you. That is a genuine, great criticism that, yes, Muppets may be funny. It may be the milieu of your campaign, and I can see the humor in it. But
I need B-dubs to correct me if I get wrong what happened. But I think that whole thing is kind of hilarious because B-dubs used to give Jeffro so much crap about how crazy things got in Trollopolis, and he was like, "Your game is gonzo." B-dubs is playing Axe, which is based on the Byzantine Empire, the late Roman Empire, and everything seemed so much more serious. And then they had I think this is what happened. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I know a lot about Trollopolis because I read up on it before I joined. I believe that somebody got their hands on a wish spell, and they had noticed that in Muppet movies, there's always one human and the rest are all Muppets. So they used their wish spell to say, "I want to be the only human. Everybody else is Muppets." Right? And so after giving Jeffro crap about how gonzo his game is, now all of a sudden his own setting, it's either well, are you going to take the agency away from the player that got the wish spell, or is everybody a stinking Muppet now? So that may be wrong, that may be right. I don't know. I think that's hilarious anyway. But I mean, point taken.
Yeah, but Fog of War, because Black Lodge was asking.
Yes.
So our boy Lord Mateus has a deal. He worked an entire week to form an alliance with the Fat Crab.
You know what? I feel like we should have just invited Mateus to come on here. We talked about it so much this session. Anyway, go ahead.
Honestly, yeah. But so Lord Mateus, he has a deal with the Fat Crab, where it's basically Hitler and Stalin. They agreed to like leave each other alone.
Yeah.
The Fat Crab was going to be Hitler in this situation. He was gonna attack Lord Mateus, and I genuinely don't know if Lord Mateus anticipated that. They both agreed that they were going to attack you. Yep. They were both going to attack you in a joint attack and wipe you out.
The guy who could barely play.
Yep, they were going to wipe you out. But what Lord Mateus didn't anticipate was that the Fat Crab was never going to attack you in that joint attack.
Oh, okay.
So they were going to let Lord Mateus do all the work. Lord Mateus, from how I understand how this was all supposed to go down, Lord Mateus was going to take significant casualties from fighting you because they thought you had like tons of armies. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I had no idea what was going on and couldn't communicate it well to them.
Crossface was helping me with that, with like getting some mercenaries. I was just like, maybe we should buy some rental property.
So they thought you had a ton of armies. So the Fat Crab's plan was to let Lord Mateus's armies get mostly wiped out by this and then storm his castle and kill him.
All right.
That's what his plan was.
It wasn't going to go down like that. He was going to roll me. The mega dungeon under the palace was going to become his problem, and then the Fat Crab would have been in trouble.
So the funny thing is you probably would have taken over his territory, Lord Mateus, and then the Fat Crab probably would have occupied yours, and then you both be switched with each other. So you would have switched.
But you would have had but no, because even if Fat Crab took him over, he still had all that spy stuff in his own territory. He could have done an insurgency.
And I think he had an army that he left defending. I don't remember. But yeah.
I was way outclassed.
You were dealing with like pro war gamers on your border, and you're over here like, I just want to make a fun little guild for the players.
I'm gonna help them out. They can have a tattoo, and they were like, "Here's." Like I was Paul Atreides, and they were like Harkonnens in the Sardaukar.
Oh yeah, Lord Mateus was definitely the Sardaukar. Like I forgot he had 1,000 men. That was another problem. I need to figure out how many mercenaries, mages, all this stuff. Like I need to figure out specific numbers for the.
You had infinite mercenaries. If you could afford it, you could roll one up, and they were.
It was quantum, like whatever. It was legit quantum whatever, and while I'm not smart enough to get into the milieu of acts and the numbers of everything, if I revisit the Yellow City, I genuinely would have to like figure out the numbers of how many old wide sages are there, how many of this level are there.
X is very good at that financial and at that infrastructural. Like he thought really hard about it, and I feel like it might be easier to get into than first edition as far as reading it.
I may just have to wait till Acts 2 because
that's what I'm doing. Yeah,
I'm trying to
on Kickstarter.
I'm trying to like have my own house by next winter, so I'm trying to tight with my money. So it's while I would love to go out and buy every RPG system, which Jeffro may or may not agree with, I can't tell through the kayfabe.
I think for first edition, he would say you don't need anything but the core books. But if it was Rifts, he would say buy all the books you can. At least from what his Twitter says lately.
He's obsessed with Rifts, which I love for him. I'm not a sci-fi guy, but I'm happy that
I'm still trying to learn first edition, man. I'm doing the Mollison solo play thing with the no prep and rolling it up as we go. So, looking like there's a lot of love for Axe in the chat here.
I felt bad for it, but there was one time I did say no. Was we had a DM from another BROSR campaign come in and try telling me that I needed to play Axe, and I said no. And then they tried to give me their war game system that was based off of Axe.
Yeah.
And Crossface was like, we don't need a 20-page war we legit just have to multiply the numbers by 10.
Yeah.
Like,
chainmail style.
We had Crossface run most of our mass combat, and that's what it was. It was times 10 or times 20 or times 40, and then he figured out what the numbers were. Like,
yeah,
I thought it was cool, but I don't understand why we needed 20 pages to do that.
I don't know. But what I do know is we're coming up on 2.5 hours. Like, I had expected this to be an hour conversation. Man, I have had a blast talking with you about this stuff.
Awesome.
Just understanding what you were dealing with and what solutions you were coming up with to some very novel and unique problems that I think most D&D players never have to even think about. Is there like a final thought you think we should end it on? One thing that you want to leave our audience? And by the way, thanks guys for this has like been the most active chat I've had on. This is only my 3rd time doing this, but I feel like it's been really valuable, and I've really enjoyed my time with you guys. What is like? Put a button on this for us. What's the last thought?
I think that playing a Braunstein, even if a temporary one where you're like, we're going to do 2 weeks or a month or whatever, is worth it. But I think you should be at small scale, and I think you should have everything worked out beforehand.
All right. Ryan, curator, thank you very much for coming on.
Thanks
I
for
feel like
having me.
if I had asked a while ago, maybe the answer would have been no. But
it would have been no. Yeah. Yeah,
the guys in the Discord worked on you.
This thing, like, low-key wondering if you were going to bring up tweets of mine that were like egregious and like cross-examine me. I was wondering. I was like, is this going to be that? Is it not? When you were asking me on Twitter, I'm like, oh no.
So my 2 things are, number 1, I try never to tell people who to be online, and number 2, I am just very fascinated with this style of play, and I want to learn from the people that have been in the trenches duking it out and know what they're talking about. So I really appreciate you coming on. Thanks everyone else for being here, and we'll see you next time. I don't know if I'm gonna get another guest, but if I do, I'll let you know. It'll probably be like the 1990s rave where like you won't know what day or time it's gonna be until I post it on Twitter. But
are you gonna start playing your BROSR? What is it? Your BROSR?
Oh, the rap
as an intro or whatever.
I probably should. I was expecting to take a lot of crap over that.
It's hilarious,
bro. But I was cracking myself up.
Black Lodge Games could appreciate it. That's how funny it is.
I would hope so. I was like worried about some of those guys. I was worried that
Lord Mateus for part 2 from the perspective of a patron would be great.
That would be Lord Mateus. If you we're friends on Twitter, if you'd be up for that, let me know and we'll put it together. And maybe we could like do like a reunion, have like some of the like do a panel with a bunch of the patrons of BROriental, and they can like share their side of it. Thanks, Brian. That's a good idea, man. All right, guys, that's enough for us. Have a great night. Thanks for sticking with us for this long, and we'll see you next time on This is Dunder Moose.